Hey there, scary story fanatics! Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. I sure hope you all got what was coming to you this Christmas. Speaking of getting what's coming to you, prepare to reap what you sow as Doughboy420 illuminates your way through tonight's dark tale of terror, The Candle Girl.
It was a terribly cold night, the last night of the year, and snow fell slowly to pile upon the ground. Little Lily made her way through the streets, her old and torn shoes trudging through the snow, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, crossing over each other and holding her tattered coat closely to her body. Lily had spent her day, the last day of the year, selling little trinkets that she had crafted from discarded pieces of things that she had found in alleys and dumpsters. She had talent, though her canvas was very limited. She usually made at least a few bucks so she could buy herself a meal, but not today. Today, she didn't earn a single cent, and she was returning home with nothing to show for it. She had recently taken up residence in an abandoned warehouse building. It was cold and empty, the place was sturdy and at least kept her out of the elements. Unfortunately, it was a bit of a hike to get back to her humble abode, and she did not expect to be hit by a snowstorm on the way back. The day had been so warm and sunny, but now it was dark and freezing. The poor girl stumbled, and as she did, her ragged shoe slipped off of her foot. She fell face first into a mound of snow, and as she climbed to her feet, she noticed a dark shadow looming over top of her. Quickly, she spun around to see a large, bulbous shadow disappearing into an alleyway. She was a bit creeped out, but her first order of business was to find her lost shoe. Lily sifted through the snow where she had fallen, but there was nothing to be found except for wet, powdery snow. The young girl sighed with disappointment and then gasped with realization. That shadow that stood over her, had he taken her shoe? The girl found herself even more creeped out. There was some creeper stealing poor girl's shoes. Lily hurriedly continued home, quickly moving in the opposite direction from where that bulbous shadow had disappeared. But unfortunately, her path would lead her down a few dark alleyways, and she wanted to be able to see what was coming. She had found a few candles in the garbage outside of a recently foreclosed house. She had been meaning to sell them, but there were no takers. Now, she was pretty thankful that she had them. Lily retrieved the candles from her backpack and then lit them with the lighter that she had kept on hand. It had very little fluid left. She figured it would be easier to keep a candle lit than a lighter. The young girl held her small hand in front of the flame to shield it from the wind. She had traversed it to a point of where the alley had split into a T, where the alley led out to two separate streets. But as she moved past the corner, she was startled by a large, bulbous shadow. The poor girl was terrified of the resonating thought echoing through her mind that the man that had stolen her shoe had followed her. However, when the light of the candle flickered through the darkness, she discovered that the shadow was nothing more than a tall and jolly-looking snowman. She sighed in relief and smiled at the corn-cob pipe and his button nose, all topped off with a raggedy old top hat. She needed a bit of a pick-me-up, and this did just the trick. But after a moment of joy came a moment of confusion. Why would someone build a snowman in the middle of a dark alley where no one would see it? She thought to herself. It was then that her candle lit up with the long, stick arms of the snowman. Lily stepped backward in shock when she saw what was hanging from one of the twigs, one of the snowman's hands. It was an old and tattered shoe, a shoe that matched the one still on her foot. It was then that the girl heard a rumble of quiet, baritone laughing that came from within the snowman. Suddenly, the snow began to melt and drop away to reveal a mass of flesh and gore beneath the balls of snow. The bark upon the wooden arms of the snowman began to peel away to reveal yellowed bone beneath, and the snowman's coal-piece eyes began to sink back inward to reveal two dark holes where they once had been. The girl screamed in terror and turned to run down the alleyway as the fleshy, gore-filled snowman continued to laugh at her, his laughs now bellowing and echoing across the stone walls that surrounded them. She stumbled to the ground and her candle went out, leaving her in darkness. Lily feared that the monster would now be upon her and that she was going to die, but there was only silence as the snow fell around her. Lily turned over to see that the snowman was still in place. He hadn't moved at all, and everything seemed normal once more. She gathered her courage and investigated the snowman a bit further. It was completely normal. Just a regular old snowman. No blood, no gore, no missing shoe either. Just a snowman. The girl again sighed in relief before gathering up her things and continuing onward towards the end of the alley, all the while confused and still a bit terrified of what she just witnessed. What did I just see? Am I going crazy? What's going on? All these thoughts and more rushed through her mind as she continued on toward home. Lily lit her candle again and continued her path back toward the old warehouse, back to her warm, or less cold bed. She made her way out of the alley and out onto a long, empty street. The snow was now falling swiftly. It was pelting the girl in the face. The cold air numbed her nearly to the bone. As she walked down the sidewalk, she would slow her pace so that she could look into the windows of the storefronts containing all sorts of wondrous things. Beautiful dresses and warm winter coats, TVs and video game systems, all sorts of beautiful trinkets and toys. The toys, in particular, kind of warmed Lily's soul. They reminded her of better times, when she lived comfortably and happily. Lily stopped by a window whose display light had burned out, leaving the children's playthings in near complete darkness. The light of Lily's candle flickered into the window, creating a small glare from the glass, but also revealing the toys contained inside. There was a large assortment of toys, all scattered about on a display that had several steps, each tier displaying a different theme. The bottom row was covered with an array of cars and trucks of all sorts and ages, some modern and some antique metal ones, but all of them looked shiny and new. The top row contained stuffed animals, large and small, and everywhere in between. There were teddy bears, plush dogs, cats, wolves, tigers, dinosaurs, and dragons. But it was just the center shelf that reminded her particularly of her childhood. The center shelf held all kinds of children's dolls. There were some delicate porcelain dolls that were set center stage in the middle of the window. They were colorful and bright, dressed in red and white. They felt very Christmassy. Lily stood there and stared into the window for a moment, and it was then that she was about to leave for home that she noticed something off about the dolls in the center of the shelf. Their dresses seemed to glimmer in the candlelight. The red dress appeared to be wet. It seemed darker than it was before. Then Lily's eyes darted over to the doll in white. that was to the right of the one in red. She watched as little pinpoints of red began to appear on her white dress, before slowly growing larger until they encompassed the entire dress, making it a match for the other dolls' dresses in dark crimson hues. Then, the red liquid began to flow across the white shelves of the display and pour down onto the toy cars and trucks below. It was blood. The dolls were bleeding right in front of her eyes, their non-existent hearts pumping blood out of their little glass bodies. The dolls' eyes then began to melt away into a mass of pink-hued, viscous fluid before flowing out of their sockets and down onto their pale, porcelain faces. As the fluid flowed from their hollowed-out sockets, it left cracks in its wake. The dolls' faces began to crack and split to reveal the hollow darkness beneath, the cracks following behind the pink-hued fluid, the entire length of their face, from their eyes to their necks. Lily was panicking now. She gasped in short breaths, and she could feel her heart beating in her chest. She could hear the blood pumping through her ears. The girl was nearly knocked off of her feet when a forceful gust of wind hit her from the side and blew her candle out. In the blink of an eye, all was back to normal again. The toys in the darkness of the store were all now their jolly and playful-looking selves. The toy cars and trucks were not plastered with blood, and the dolls in the center were all back to normal, in perfect condition. Lily feared that she was losing her mind. She was terrified that she was seeing things and that something was wrong with her. Thoughts of spending her days within the grips of insanity while living on the streets began to flood her mind, but she was quickly snapped back to reality by another bone-chilling gust of winter air. The poor girl turned around, shivering in the cold, and began to again walk toward her humble abode in the warehouse. Lily grew weary as she trekked onward toward her home. She was nearly there, but she still had to travel through one more dark alley before she reached her bed. Again, the girl flicked her lighter to light the candle. It took several tries, but she was eventually able to spark the flint into a flame. Using the very last bit of fluid in the lighter, the girl lit up her candle and began her way through the alley. Her feet trudged through the thick layer of snow upon the ground. She hobbled forward, with the lack of one shoe causing her to walk in such a manner. Her toes nearly turned blue as they poked through the holes in the cold, wet sock. As Lily walked, the light from her candle flickered a reflective light off of the slick, ice-covered walls encompassing the claustrophobic alleyway. It was when she passed by a window that the light inside the building caught her eye, and once again, she stopped for a moment to peer inside. She quickly realized that this was no window. It was more like a hole in the wall, but when she moved her candle's light away from the hole, it seemed to disappear to reveal a brick wall where the hole had once been. Again, the girl moved her candle forward towards the wall, and again, the bricks of the wall turned transparent to reveal the wonders inside. Was she really losing her mind, or was the candle somehow revealing unseen things to the girl? Lily peered inside to see a brightly lit room. Red stockings were still hung from the chimney, and a Christmas tree was decorated with all manner of lights and ornaments inside. Christmas had just passed only a handful of days before, and many people still had their beautiful holiday decorations set up to enjoy. Lily sighed in happiness, again remembering the wonderful days that had long since passed. She watched as the lights of the tree flickered. She smiled as a feeling of warmth passed over her. It was then that she caught some movement in the corner of her eye from within the transparent revealings of the candle's light. The girl watched as a family gathered around the warmly lit fire in the fireplace. A mother wearing a beautiful flower-print dress, a father dressed in his Sunday best, and a little girl no older than 5 years old or so. The three of them stood happily in front of the fire with their backs to Lily. Then, suddenly, the little girl inside turned to look at Lily, and at first, Lily wondered if the family inside could see her, but then something even more odd clicked in her mind. The little girl looked familiar, very familiar, and not only that, so did the interior of the home. It was the apartment that she had lived in before everything changed, and the little girl inside, the little girl in her white Christmas dress, was Lily. Lily became a bit apprehensive at what she was seeing. She was unsure if she should turn away or continue to look into the memories of her past. It was then that a spatter of blood shot across the little girl's face as Lily looked upon it. Then, in just the blink of an eye, she saw the girl's parents' bodies on the floor in front of the fireplace. They were covered in blood, as a pool of crimson formed beneath them, and so too was the little girl's dress, drenched in a sanguine hue. The little girl held the knife in her hand and just stared blankly back at Lily. "No," Lily spoke aloud. "No!" she then yelled as her tears began to flow from her eyes, almost instantly freezing upon her rosy cheeks. "No, stop it!" Lily yelled again. A smile then graced the little girl's expression as her eyes seemed to cloud over and become as black as two rounded chunks of coal set within her eye sockets. Lily pounded on the wall and screamed, but as the tears streamed down her face, her vision became blurred, and then everything faded to black. Lily was found the next day. Her rosy cheeks contrasted her pale blue skin, her tears still frozen upon her face as her lifeless body stared blankly out into nothingness, just sitting there, clutching a nearly completely melted candle within her frozen hand.
Well, that was sure enlightening. When you pull back the curtain on the cold truth, trepidation may freeze you in your tracks. So, if the light of truth seems too much to handle, stop in again next weekend for a story concealed in darkness. And until next time, remember to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.